Welcome to Whispers of History, where forgotten tales, strange events, and mysterious moments from the past come alive. One whisper at a time. Subscribe, relax, and let the past whisper you to sleep. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the soft hush of a medieval town still wrapped in early dawn. The cobbled streets are empty, the air damp with the lingering chill of night. Smoke curls slowly from hearths, and somewhere, a church bell prepares to toll the hour. Tonight, I invite you to step gently into a forgotten world, a day in the life of a medieval prostitute. It is not a tale told with judgment or excitement, but rather with stillness and reflection. A story meant not to startle, but to calm. Together, we will walk quietly through her hours, noticing the details of her daily rhythms, the spaces she moved through, the people she met, and the dreams that may have carried her into sleep. As you listen, allow the steady flow of history to wash over you, unhurried. There will be no rush, no demand for attention, only a soft unraveling of moments. You may stay awake, tracing each detail, or let the words fade into the background, like a gentle lullaby of the past, and so, we begin, at the break of day. The first light of morning does not always bring comfort. In a narrow room, tucked away in the quieter edges of a bustling medieval town, she stirs from uneasy rest. Her bed is simple, a straw mattress, flattened from use, with a coarse woolen blanket tugged close against the night's damp chill. The wooden shutters are closed against the outside world, but thin slivers of sunlight pierce through the cracks, laying golden lines across the uneven floorboards. The room smells faintly of smoke, of stale ale, and of sweat, a reminder of the tavern below or the night before. Furniture is sparse. Perhaps a small stool sits in the corner, a clay jug of water balanced precariously on top, and a wooden chest, battered by years of use, holding the few garments she owns. The space is modest, and though it lacks comfort, it is hers for now. Outside, faint sounds of the town are beginning. A vendor's cart creaks across cobblestones, a dog barks, and somewhere far off, the low murmur of voices begins to rise with the day. She hears it all, lying still for a moment, caught between the desire to rest longer and the knowledge that the hours ahead will demand her. When she finally sits up, the cold air of the room brushes against her skin. She wraps the blanket tightly around herself, waiting for the chill to soften. There is a pause here, a small ritual of gathering the strength to begin again. She stretches slowly, listening to the creak of the wooden frame beneath her. Sometimes her body aches, a reminder of the labor her trade demands. Yet, this moment is her own, before she must step into the world outside, before she becomes both invisible and watched. In the privacy of her small room, she can still simply exist. The light continues to grow stronger, filtering through the shutters, softening the shadows. She moves toward the small jug of water, dipping her hands into its coolness, splashing her face, rubbing gently at her eyes. The water is cold, sharp against her skin, but it wakes her fully. On mornings such as this, when the streets outside remain quiet, she might allow herself to linger just a little longer. She listens to the world waking around her, knowing she too will soon join its rhythm. This transition from rest to day is slow, deliberate, almost tender in its own way, and so her day begins, not with fanfare, but with quiet necessity, behind closed shutters, in a room both sanctuary and prison. The morning hours unfold slowly. After waking in the quiet room, she begins the careful process of preparing herself for the day. This is not simply a matter of cleanliness or clothing. For her, each gesture, each piece of fabric, each touch of oil or pigment becomes part of a mask, a transformation from the private woman who stirred in her straw bed, into the figure the world expects to see. The first ritual is always the body. She pours a little water into a basin, its surface rippling softly. There is rarely enough to bathe fully, but she wipes her skin with a damp cloth, chasing away the night's heaviness. The water is cool and sharp, waking her gently. Sometimes she rubs her body with herbs or scented oils. When she can afford them, lavender, rosemary, or sage, subtle fragrances to mask the tavern smoke that clings to her hair and clothes. When she smooths oil into her skin, it is both practical and ritualistic. The herbs ward off unpleasant smells, but they also carry with them a sense of calm. In a world where her body is often reduced to transaction, this small act is one of quiet care, a moment that belongs to her. Next comes the matter of clothing. Her garments are not the fine gowns of noblewomen. They are simple, but chosen with care. A shift of linen, slightly worn, slides over her shoulders. Then a dress dyed in muted tones, reds, blues, or earthy browns, depending on what she owns. The cloth is coarse, but clean. Around her waist, she ties a belt, often decorated with a small pouch where she can carry her coins or charms. Shoes are plain, made of leather, often patched and repaired many times over. Yet they serve their purpose, carrying her through long hours in the uneven streets of the town. Every piece she puts on is both armor and disguise, something to allow her to walk unnoticed until she wishes to be noticed. Adorning the face is its own quiet ritual. Though medieval cosmetics were not elaborate, women found ways to alter appearance. A little powder might be dusted onto her cheeks, often made from ground chalk or lead-based mixtures, though dangerous in the long term. Rouge could be applied to lips, sometimes mixed from crushed berries or tinted clays. Coal or soot might be rubbed along the eyes to make them darker, more striking in the dim glow of taverns and brothels. The act is subtle, not dramatic. In a world where excess is frowned upon, she must balance allure with restraint. To seem too bold could attract trouble, to appear too plain could bring neglect. She knows this balance instinctively. Each line and shade chosen with care. Her hair is next. It may be long, tied back with a ribbon, or covered with a veil or hood depending on where she is headed. Loose hair might carry a suggestion of boldness, while neatly tied hair gives an air of modesty. In her line of work, both appearances could be useful, depending on the day. She braids with careful fingers, humming softly to herself as the braid falls neatly down her shoulder. There is also the matter of charms, small tokens that might bring luck or protection. Many women carried them. A simple cross carved from wood, worn around the neck. A pouch of herbs believed to ward away illness. Perhaps even a coin with a hole drilled through it. Tied to a string, a reminder of hope. Before she leaves, she looks into the small bronze mirror once more. The woman reflected there is both familiar and distant. She sees the lines of weariness beneath her eyes, the trace of last night's fatigue. But she also sees the mask, clean skin, softened features, clothing chosen with care. It is enough. This moment of preparation is not only about appearance. It is a way of readying the spirit. In the silence of the morning, as the outside world stirs, she shapes herself into the role required of her. The quiet woman who woke behind closed shutters fades. In her place rises a figure who will navigate glances, bargains, and whispers. She smooths her dress one final time, adjusts the fall of her braid, and gathers her pouch. The mask is complete. To the world, she will appear as expected. Yet behind it, the inner self lingers, tired, yearning, resilient. The footsteps of neighbors echo faintly in the corridor outside. The tavern below stirs, mugs clinking as they are set out for the morning. A rooster crows somewhere in the distance. The day is calling, and she can no longer delay. She places her hand on the rough wooden door, breathing once more in the quiet, as though gathering her courage. The next part of the day awaits, beyond the door, beyond the mask, one last glance behind her, the small room, the basin, the bed, the chest. This is her refuge, however modest, and she leaves it carefully, as though stepping out of one world into another, and with that, she steps into the corridor, where the air is cooler and the sounds of the waking world begin to rise. Soon she will step into the streets, where every eye may watch, and yet not truly see her. The door creaks as she steps into the cooler air of the corridor. Beyond, the world waits. She pauses, then descends the narrow staircase, her hand brushing along the rail polished by countless others before her. The tavern below stirs with the sounds of mugs being stacked, bread cut, and the faint murmur of early drinkers who never truly left. When she steps outside, the first touch of sunlight brushes against her skin. The town is alive now. Vendors call their wares in sing-song voices, carts creak along the cobblestones, and children dart between stalls, laughing and barefoot. The air is rich with scents, freshly baked bread, roasting meat, the sharp tang of tanned leather. She does not walk modestly. Her hair, unbound, cascades freely down her shoulders, glinting in the sunlight. Where other women keep theirs tightly braided or veiled, hers flows, wild, unruly, drawing eyes without effort. Around her neck, a simple cord dangles with a token charm, swaying with each step. Her clothing, though simple, speaks boldly. The neckline of her dress dips lower than most, revealing the soft curve of her collarbone. A hint of skin meant to invite glances. The fabric is drawn tight at the waist with a belt, emphasizing her form, while her sleeves fall loosely, sliding back to reveal bare wrists and forearms. Every detail is deliberate, but it feels untamed, as though she dresses not only for work, but to defy the restraints placed upon women like her. Around her, people notice. Some glance quickly away, their faces set in disapproval, yet their eyes linger longer than they admit. Others stare openly, men with curiosity, merchants with amusement, travelers with hunger. She is at once familiar and scandalous, a figure always present on the edge of society, never fully welcomed, never truly gone. Her footsteps echo with a certain rhythm, steady and unhurried. The cobblestones beneath her are uneven, but she walks as though the town belongs to her. In truth, it does not. But for a few passing hours each day, she claims a part of it, the streets, the taverns, the glances stolen in her direction. Not every passerby sees her as alluring. To some, she is a warning, a figure whispered about in sermons, a shadow moving too close to temptation. Mothers tug their children closer, murmuring disapproval. Yet even in judgment, there is fascination. She embodies both danger and desire, wrapped into one untamed form. At the edge of the square, she pauses. Here, men gather, travelers resting after long journeys, soldiers returning from guard, merchants with coins heavy in their purses. She leans casually against a wooden post, tilting her head just slightly so her hair falls across one shoulder, catching the light. Her presence is unspoken invitation, her silence louder than words. For her, this is performance as much as survival. Each look, each gesture, is carefully chosen. A glance held too long can invite, a glance too brief may discourage. Her smile, when it comes, is slow and deliberate, never too eager, never too cold. This is her art, and the streets are her stage, and so the morning passes, with the world moving around her, yet also revolving toward her. She exists in contrast, restrained by laws, condemned by preachers, yet undeniably woven into the very rhythm of the city. Her wild hair and untamed stride mark her apart, while her presence draws life, color, and quiet rebellion into the stone-gray streets. The streets themselves are her domain, though they do not belong to her. Each cobblestone remembers her footsteps, each alley whispers her laughter or silence. As the day unfolds, she prepares to move deeper into its hidden spaces, where the marketplace of her trade begins. The streets give way to narrower alleys, where sunlight struggles to reach the ground. Here, the city feels different, quieter, more secretive. It is in these shadows that her trade thrives, away from the bustle of markets and the stern gaze of the church. She knows where to go. The taverns are alive even in daylight, their doors never fully closed. Inside, the air is thick with ale, wood smoke, and laughter that borders on roughness. Tables are crowded with men, merchants resting from their journeys, soldiers boasting of battles, travelers clutching their purses tightly. In such places, she is never invisible. Bathhouses too are places of meeting. Though meant for washing, they become places of whispered exchanges. Laughter muffled behind steam. In these dim spaces, her presence carries another kind of allure, skin half hidden by mist, voices softened by the echo of water, and then there are the brothels, recognized, taxed, and policed by the city itself. Behind painted doors, women like her gather under the gaze of a mistress who keeps order, collects coin, and ensures the house survives. Here, she is both safer and more bound, protected from the dangers of the street, yet tethered to rules, debts, and expectations. The spaces themselves breathe with atmosphere. Wooden beams creak above, straw litters the floors, and rushes scattered underfoot release the faint scent of herbs meant to mask less pleasant smells. On the walls, scraps of fabric hang, reds, purples, colors chosen for richness even if the cloth is worn. Candles flicker in iron holders, softening the shadows. Here she moves differently than in the open streets. In the brothel or bathhouse, there is no need for pretense. Her walk is slower, her gestures softer, her laughter deliberately drawn out like a song. She knows that every movement can entice, and she shapes herself into an answer for the gazes fixed upon her. The marketplace of the flesh is not built only on skin. It thrives on words, glances, gestures that last no more than seconds but leave lasting impressions. A touch to the arm, a whispered joke, the faintest trace of a smile, all become currency in the exchange. Coins clink across tables, slipped into palms, tucked into belts. Sometimes the transaction is quick, wordless. Other times it is prolonged, stretched into a dance of conversation and bargaining. The man may boast, she may laugh, and in that laughter lies agreement or refusal. Each place has its risks. Taverns carry the danger of drunken brawls, bathhouses the danger of whispers spreading, brothels the danger of debts binding tighter than chains. Yet for her, these are familiar landscapes. She knows how to move through them, when to linger, when to leave, when to let her laughter rise, and when to fall into silence. At times, her wildness is what draws men to her, loose hair, bold neckline, laughter that rings above the murmur of the crowd. At other times, it is her silence, her stillness, the mystery of her half-smile that pulls them closer. She is both fire and shadow, shifting as needed. The spaces themselves almost seem to bend toward her presence. Men lean in closer when she passes. Conversations pause when her laughter floats across the room. Even in silence, she marks her place, a figure both of desire and defiance. Yet she is always aware, these places are not built for her. They are built for those who come seeking, for those who pay. She navigates them with care, her mind attuned to every shift in tone, every flicker of danger. The marketplace of the flesh is as much about survival as it is about pleasure, and so, as day stretches toward evening, she moves between these spaces, tavern, bathhouse, brothel, where coin, glances, and whispers weave together. It is not a marketplace of goods alone, but of bodies, of fleeting warmth, of borrowed intimacy. The world beyond the doors may judge her. The pulpit may condemn, the law may regulate. But here, in the soft light of taverns and brothels, her role is undeniable. She is both seller and sold, both untamed presence and weary participant in a trade older than memory itself, for now, she rests within the heartbeat of this hidden marketplace. Soon, she will meet the men who step forward, the clients who shape her day and her night. But in this moment, as the candles burn low and the air hums with laughter, she holds the stage as her own. The faces blur together with time. Merchants, soldiers, travelers, even the occasional cloaked scholar or weary priest, each arrives with coin, each with a need unspoken until it rests heavily in the air between them. She has learned to read men not by their words, but by their silences. Some men are loud, their voices booming with ale and bravado. They speak as though their laughter can hide loneliness, as though their boasts will disguise longing. She listens, nodding at the right moments, her smile slow and knowing, her hand resting just close enough to remind them she is near. Others are quiet, almost fragile. They sit close without words, their eyes lowered, their hands trembling slightly as they reach for hers. For them, the conversation is not of battles or trade, but of fleeting tenderness, the sound of her voice, the warmth of her presence. She adapts to each, shifting like water. To the boisterous, she becomes playful, her laughter rising like a bell. To the weary, she softens, her voice dropping low, each word like a bomb. To the lonely, she offers silence, simply sitting close enough for them to forget, if only for a short while, the weight of their solitude. Not all clients seek only the body. Many linger for words. They tell her stories, of journeys across the sea, of wives left behind, of wars fought in mud and rain. She listens, never rushing, her gaze steady, her posture calm. In her company, their voices soften, secrets tumbling free as though unburdened by her stillness. Sometimes she speaks in return. Not of her own life, rarely that. But she tells fragments of tales overheard, bits of gossip turned to gentle stories, little pieces of the world beyond the brothel walls. For some men, her voice itself is enough, a melody carrying them far from their troubles. The exchanges are as much performance as intimacy. She leans closer when needed, lets her hand rest briefly on her wrist, tilts her head so her hair falls like a curtain between them and the noisy world outside. These gestures weave the illusion of closeness, of something more lasting than the moment allows, yet behind the mask, she measures everything. How quickly he breathes, how often his eyes shift, how heavy the coin purse sounds when it lands on the table. She balances charm and caution, allure and distance. Survival depends not only on beauty, but on listening deeply, knowing when to soothe, when to retreat, when to press closer. There are those who return often, familiar faces who seek her not only for the flesh but for the comfort of recognition. They greet her as though she were an old friend, and for a brief hour, she plays the part. These encounters carry less danger, yet their familiarity reminds her of what she offers and what she can never keep. And then there are strangers. Travelers who come only once, leaving their stories and their coins behind. They fade quickly from memory, yet each leaves a trace, a scent, a phrase, the echo of a laugh. Her days are stitched together with these fragments, each man a fleeting note in a long, unending song. Through it all, conversation is the true currency. Bodies may meet, but it is the words, their softness, their confessions, their laughter, that fill the hours. In those murmured exchanges lies a brief illusion of connection. A reminder that even in transactions, the human need for closeness remains. At times, the line between performance and truth blurs. She may laugh too freely, smile too warmly, or allow silence to linger too long, until even she wonders if the moment belongs to her or to the mask she wears. But the illusion must always hold. It is her craft, her shield, her livelihood. As night falls deeper, the taverns grow louder, the coins heavier, the conversations more slurred. Yet still she sits, listening, leaning, speaking in tones that turn the noise of the world into something softer. The clients come and go, each leaving behind only coins and echoes. She gathers herself after each, smoothing her dress, adjusting her hair, preparing for the next. The rhythm is steady, unbroken, a tide that rises and falls without pause, and so, the night continues, voices blending into one another, laughter into silence, faces into shadows. Her work is not only of flesh, but of presence, of listening, of weaving illusion from words. This is her art, her survival, her burden, and her gift. For all the laughter and candlelight that filled her nights, there was always another presence, one that moved quietly in the background, shaping her existence in ways she could never ignore. The law, the church, and the unspoken judgments of the city pressed upon her life like a shadow at the edge of every doorway. The law did not erase her trade, nor did it openly condone it. Instead, it tolerated her existence while reminding her of her place. City authorities often designated districts where she and others could work, streets known and whispered about, where lanterns burned late and doors were left ajar. She was permitted, but contained, fines were common. If she strayed beyond her boundaries, if she caused trouble, or if she was seen too close to the market square in daylight, the city watch might step in. The punishments were rarely severe, but they were reminders. Each coin paid out for a misstep, another weighed upon her survival. And then, there was the church. Bells rang each morning, each evening, their sound drifting into her chamber even as she closed her eyes to rest after a long night. Priests preached from pulpits against sin, against lust, against women like her. The words were sharp, but distant, sermons echoing through stone walls she rarely entered, yet the truth was more complicated. Though condemned in word, her trade was woven into the fabric of medieval life. The authorities turned their gaze when coin flowed. Soldiers on campaign were sometimes encouraged to visit women like her, a means to maintain order among restless men. Even clergy, sworn to vows, were known to wander into her quarter under cover of night. This contradiction was not lost on her. She lived in a space between necessity and scorn, tolerated for her role, yet condemned for her existence. It was a delicate balance, one that demanded caution. Too much attention could bring shame, fines, or worse. Too little visibility, and survival became uncertain. Confession, too, carried its own weight. Some women entered the confessional, kneeling behind the lattice, whispering sins into the darkness. Others avoided it, fearing the judgment or the exposure of their secret lives. For her, the church was not a sanctuary but a reminder, a voice that both condemned and, paradoxically, relied upon her presence. The stigma extended beyond the pulpit. Respectable townsfolk often looked away when she passed, their eyes quick to avoid hers, their mouths tight with disapproval. Yet some of those same voices would whisper her name behind closed shutters, seeking her in secrecy. This duplicity was something she carried silently, understanding it as part of the life she had chosen, or perhaps the life that had chosen her. At times, the law and the church intertwined in their control. Festivals, holy days, or times of plague often brought crackdowns, sudden purges of her quarter, warnings to disperse, closures of the very doors that gave her shelter. In these moments, survival demanded quick adjustment, retreating into private rooms, shifting to new streets, relying on trusted patrons for protection. Still, despite the weight of authority, her life continued. The laws were rules to navigate, not walls that could hold her entirely. The church was a voice to acknowledge, not one that silenced her completely. Like the wild looseness of her hair and the boldness of her gaze. She carried on at the edges of their reach, in whispers. She and others like her spoke of the hypocrisy of priests who warned against them by day and sought them by night, of guards who find them in the market, then lingered in their quarters after dark. Such contradictions became the backdrop of their lives, familiar as the cobblestones beneath their feet. These tensions shaped her sense of self. She was not merely outside the law, but woven into its fabric in a way few admitted. She was not only judged by the church, but silently used as part of its community's unspoken balance. To live in such a space required resilience, not only of the body, but of the spirit. When she lay down at dawn, the echoes of sermons still in her ears, the weight of laws still pressing upon her, she found her own kind of prayer. Not in the words of the church, but in the simple act of survival. Each day endured, each night navigated, each choice made carefully. It was its own quiet devotion, one of endurance. The shadow of authority was always present. Yet it never erased her. It framed her, shaped her, pressed her into a narrow space where she learned to move carefully, to live fully within boundaries that might otherwise have broken her. And so, she remained, a figure both condemned and necessary, hidden and central, fragile and unshakably resilient. Even within judgment, even beneath watchful eyes, she endured. Her life was a testament not of sin, but of survival, woven quietly into the city's fabric, a shadow within its light. For all the flickering candles and soft laughter that filled her nights, there was always a truth that lingered in silence. Her body bore the weight of risk. Each evening carried with it a kind of gamble. She never knew who might step through the door, what intentions he carried, or what unseen shadows followed him. Illness was one of her most constant companions. The city streets teemed with sickness, fevers that spread in summer heat, coughs that echoed in winter. Some sicknesses moved more quietly, passed from one body to another, lingering in the blood. She did not know the words we now use for them, but she knew their signs: sores that would not heal, aches that hollowed the body, fatigue that pressed like stone. Her remedies were simple, passed down by women before her, whispered in small circles. A paste of garlic or onion, said to draw out poisons. A tincture of wormwood to cleanse the body. Baths with rosemary or lavender when coin allowed, their steam lifting the weight from her skin. These were not cures, but they were comforts, gestures of care in a life where few others offered it. Violence, too, was a danger she knew well. Some men came seeking comfort. Others came with tempers sharpened by drink or by their own restless discontent. A raised voice could become a raised hand, and in such moments she had to be both clever and careful. A gentle tone, a soft smile, a way of redirecting, these became her armor as much as any locked door. When threats grew sharper, she relied on her sisters. The women of her house were not merely companions in trade, they were allies. If one raised her voice, others came quickly. Together, they were stronger than they appeared, and it was often enough to send even the most reckless man stumbling back into the night. There were other risks, quieter but no less real. The toll of exhaustion, nights spent without true rest, mornings surrendered to sleep while the city lived in daylight. The body grew weary, the spirit too. For some, the weight became too much, and they slipped away into silence, lost not to one single danger but to the slow erosion of years. To endure, she found her own remedies. Not only herbs and tinctures, but rituals of quiet care. Combing her hair slowly, oiling it with lavender. Singing softly to herself as she sewed a loose seam or mended her gown. These small acts were not luxuries, they were anchors, steadying her against the tides of her life. Her resilience was also a remedy. She knew how to read the smallest signs, the tilt of a man's head, the set of his jaw, the weight in his footsteps. She could sense which ones carried danger and which carried only weariness. That intuition, sharpened night after night, was one of her strongest defenses. Beyond her own knowledge, there were healers, women who lived at the edges of the city, who knew more of herbs than priests approved of. Some called them midwives, others whispered witch. To her, they were lifelines. She sought them when remedies failed, when fevers burned too high, when blood flowed too heavily. Their wisdom was dangerous, but it was also indispensable. The risks of her trade also shaped her bonds. Shared danger created sisterhood, unspoken but strong. When one woman fell ill, others brought broth or covered her shift. When one was threatened, others stood by her. Their solidarity was its own form of remedy, a protection built not of walls, but of loyalty, and yet, she never forgot how fragile that protection could be. A single bad night could unravel much. A single sickness could take hold and linger. The balance between survival and collapse was thin, and she walked it carefully each day. The remedies she carried, then, were not just physical but also inward. A certain calm acceptance, a steadying breath, a quiet resilience. She learned to face fear without letting it consume her, to carry scars without letting them define her. That balance, like the balance of her entire life, was delicate but enduring. Through it all, she continued. Night after night, season after season. The risks pressed upon her, but the remedies, herbs, care, sisterhood, resilience, gave her strength. They did not erase the dangers, but they allowed her to endure them, to walk another night, to rise again after sleep. It was a cycle, like the rhythm of day and night. Risk followed her always. But so did her quiet means of survival. And in this balance, she found a way to live, not without danger, but not without strength. Even as others condemned her, even as dangers pressed in, she carried remedies the world did not see. In the hush of her chamber, in the laughter of her sisters, in the scent of herbs drifting from her bath, she found her own healing. And with it, she continued into the next night. Not every man who came to her sought only the release of desire. Some came for something quieter, less easily spoken. Loneliness could be just as sharp as hunger, and the walls of her chamber often became the place where men laid that loneliness down. In these moments, she was not only a body but a companion. She listened to their stories, their disappointments, their fears, the weight of their marriages, their longing for affection. She heard of quarrels with wives, of battles fought long ago, of sons lost to fever. She rarely judged. Her role was to receive, to hold space, even if the connection lasted no longer than the flicker of a candle's flame. These encounters brought a different rhythm to her nights. There was less urgency, more quiet. Sometimes it was enough to sit side by side, the silence itself becoming a kind of comfort. He paid for her presence, but the exchange was not always about desire, it was about being seen, if only for a brief span of time. For her, such moments were both balm and burden. She too knew loneliness, and in the tenderness of these encounters, she sometimes caught a glimpse of what she longed for herself. A hand that lingered not in lust, but in gentle affection. A gaze that saw her not as a commodity, but as a person. Yet these moments were fleeting, bound by coin and circumstance. When morning came, he would rise, adjust his cloak, and step back into the world that rarely acknowledged her existence. The tenderness dissolved like mist in the sun, leaving her with the faint ache of having touched something she could not hold. She carried this longing quietly. It was not for wealth, nor even for freedom, it was for something simple, yet elusive, companionship without condition. To be loved not in secret, not in shadow, but in the open light of day. Sometimes, she found companionship not in her clients, but among her sisters. They, too, understood the ache of impermanence. Together, they shared laughter that was genuine, not purchased. They mended one another's gowns, shared bowls of stew, hummed songs as they brushed each other's hair. It was not romance, but it was a form of love nonetheless, steady, enduring, and freely given. In rare moments, she allowed herself to imagine what life might have been if the world had offered her another path. A husband chosen not by contract but by affection. A hearth where she was not a guest but the keeper. Children who might have reached for her hands not as strangers, but as kin. Such dreams were bittersweet. They soothed her heart even as they reminded her of what was unlikely to come. Yet she did not reject them, they were part of her humanity, proof that beneath the layers of survival and resilience, she still carried hope. At times, the lines blurred. A client might return again and again, his visits less about lust and more about familiarity. Over time, a fragile bond formed. She knew better than to call it love, but still, it carried a warmth that lingered longer than most, but even these bonds carried risk. To grow too close was to invite disappointment. She had seen it before, a man who spoke promises of leaving his wife, of keeping her in comfort, only to vanish when reality pressed too near. Love, for her, was a dangerous dream, one that could wound more deeply than any hand or illness, and so she balanced herself between presence and distance. She offered warmth, she offered tenderness, but she guarded her heart with quiet care. Companionship, for her, was something given in fragments, enough to ease loneliness, not enough to shatter her spirit when it ended. Still, the longing remained. It wove itself into her nights like a thread, delicate but unbroken. She knew it would not vanish, and in some ways, she did not wish it to. Longing gave her humanity shape. It was the tender proof that even in a world that reduced her to her body, she was still something more, still capable of yearning, of dreaming, of feeling deeply. She carried this longing like one carries a hidden jewel. It was not seen by all, but it shone within her, steady and subtle. And while the world might never grant her the companionship she desired, the very act of longing was its own form of life, a reminder that her spirit was unbroken, still tender, still human, and so, her nights continued, threaded with both companionship and solitude. Some men sought her body, some sought her listening ear. She, in turn, gave pieces of herself carefully, keeping enough to sustain her own heart. The balance was delicate, but she maintained it, as she did with all things. The streets grew quiet as the night stretched thin. The laughter from the tavern dimmed, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones faded, and one by one, candles in upper windows winked out. Her work, too, came to its natural close. The last client left, adjusting his cloak before disappearing into the shadows, leaving behind only the faint smell of wine and the creak of the wooden door. The silence after such nights was profound. In the stillness, she could hear the soft drip of water outside, the rustle of rats along the thatched roof, the faint whistle of wind pressing through the shutters. What moments before had been filled with touch, voices, and movement now became a hollow quiet. This was her time of retreat, the small ritual of gathering herself back together after being dispersed into so many hands, voices, and desires. She would sit for a while, loosening the laces of her gown until the fabric slipped gently from her shoulders. She lit a small clay lamp, its flame steady, and washed herself with a bowl of cool water. The water cleared away the day, the sweat, the touch of strangers, the dust of the streets. It was a simple act, but it carried weight. It was cleansing, but also reclaiming. As she washed, her thoughts wandered. Sometimes she thought of nothing at all, her mind empty as the water's surface. Other times, memories floated up, the sound of her mother's voice long ago. The fields of her childhood village, or a fleeting smile from a client who seemed almost kind, she would then tend to her small space. She smoothed the bedding, folded her gown across a low stool, and gathered coins into a small leather pouch. These little acts of order were her way of carving calm from the day's chaos. The body, too, needed rest. Her feet were often sore from walking cobblestone streets. Her back ached from long hours. Sometimes she rubbed a salve into her skin, something traded from an apothecary or given by another woman in her circle. Small gestures of care, even if improvised, became anchors of endurance. She might eat something small, perhaps a crust of bread left from earlier, or a bit of cheese wrapped in cloth. These quiet meals, eaten in solitude, felt different from the laughter-filled tavern tables. They were not festive, not social, but they carried their own gentle comfort. Afterward, she would unwind her hair, letting it fall fully free. The act itself was soothing. A release of tension as she combed through tangles with patient strokes. In the dim room, the strands caught the light like threads of dusk. It was in these late hours that she sometimes allowed herself to pray. Not in the formal sense of church liturgy, but in whispers, quiet words offered to no one in particular, or perhaps to the sky itself. She did not pray for riches. She prayed for gentleness, for health, for one more day. The weight of the night grew heavier, her body softened with fatigue. She lay down at last, drawing a wool blanket over herself. The straw beneath her was uneven, but it was hers, a small place of rest at the end of long hours. Through the window slit, she could see the night sky. The moon traced pale silver across the rooftops, and the stars winked faintly, as though keeping silent company. In these moments, the vastness of the world felt both comforting and unreachable. Sleep came slowly, gently. Sometimes dreams arrived, echoes of the day, or visions of places she had never seen. She drifted between memory and imagination, her breathing deepening, the world outside fading away, the night wrapped itself around her. The city outside might be restless, but here, for a brief span, she was held by stillness. No knocking on the door, no footsteps on the stair, no voices calling her name. Only silence, and the promise of dawn, and so, her day came to its close, not with grand endings, but with the soft hum of survival. She rested in the fragile peace of night, knowing that tomorrow would come with the same rhythms, the same balance of hardship and small mercies. But for now, there was nothing left to do but breathe, and let the world fall away into sleep. The medieval prostitute's day has ended, her candle burned low, her body surrendered to rest. As we step back from her world, it is worth pausing, gently, without judgment, to reflect on what we have seen. Her life was neither celebrated nor protected. Society looked upon her with suspicion, often with scorn. Yet, within those narrow alleys and dimly lit chambers, she carried on with remarkable resilience. Each morning she rose, each evening she endured, and through the silent hours of the night, she found her own small rituals of survival. It is easy, from the distance of centuries, to see only the hardships. And yet, she was more than her profession. She was a daughter once, perhaps a sister. Perhaps a mother. She laughed at times, shared bread with friends, tended to her body with quiet care, whispered prayers into the night sky. Her humanity was always present, even when the world refused to see it. As we reflect, we may find ourselves comparing her life to our own. Tonight, you rest in the safety of a bed with sheets washed clean, within walls that shield you from the cold. For her, rest was uncertain, fragile, and always shadowed by tomorrow's demands. This contrast is not meant to stir guilt, but to invite gratitude for the comforts that surround you. The echoes of her life still linger. They remind us of the hidden stories that lie beneath history's surface, lives lived in the margins. Unrecorded in grand chronicles but no less real. Her footsteps along the cobblestones have long since faded, but her existence mattered, just as every life matters, and so, as we close this journey, let the rhythm of her day drift gently from your mind. You need not hold on to the details, let them blur, as if fading into dream. What remains is a quiet understanding, that even in the harshest of times, people found ways to endure, to breathe, to live another day. Now, allow yourself to settle more deeply. Feel the softness beneath you, the quiet air around you. Unlike her, you are safe, unburdened by footsteps outside your door. This is your moment of rest, uninterrupted, your time to drift freely into sleep. Sleep now, with the comfort of knowing the past is behind you, and the present is gentle. Let her story dissolve into the hush of the night, leaving only peace in its wake. Another whisper from the past, now fading into the night. Thanks for listening. Subscribe for more sleepy stories from history. And until next time,